If we go way back in time, Lake Winona is the remnants of a former side channel of the Mississippi River. Once that isolated area happened, it was surrounded by wetlands, and so it wasn't really the true lake that we see now. But what we have today now is a very artificial shoreline of Lake Winona formed by a series of dredging projects that started back in the 1900s and have continued up through the most recent one about 23 years ago. The location of the Lake Lodge used to have a swimming beach there. A sandy beach was maintained for quite some time, and it wasn't until the city built the Bob Welch Aquatic Center that they stopped staffing the beach and basically stopped using it as a public resource. When I arrived at Winona State, Cal Fremling was on the faculty here. He had a long history of working on Lake Winona many decades prior to me arriving, and he very quickly got me involved because we shared some common interests with each other. The original Lake Winona committee, most of the members were relatively old by the mid-late 90s, and gradually it became a small group by attrition. I was left as the president and the treasurer and basically every other officer as everyone else left. And it stayed that way until very recently when we had some organizations that started looking again at the health of watersheds in the area. And out of that effort, there was a concern that Lake Winona wasn't meeting water quality standards. And so a lot of area citizens became enthused about trying to work to correct some of that issue. And the new Healthy Lake Winona group was formed out of those original meetings.
Yeah, the Healthy Lake Winona Committee works in a variety of ways. One is educating the public about stormwater pollution. Another is doing in-lake work, so working on shoreline erosion, putting in plantings around the lake to filter and protect the shoreline, and in some ways also advocating for grants and city policy changes. The group has a very diverse and extensive knowledge base of members. So there's folks who are scientists in lake ecology. They have professional landscape restorers. They have a few people who work in policy. And there's also people who have been in Winona for most of their lives and certainly know the history of what the lake was and what they'd like to see it be again. The collective knowledge base of that group has to be in the hundreds of years. Part of the reason my job was created was to work with various groups in the city that work on environmental issues, and Healthy Lake Winona was very active then and continues to be very active. So I'm the city point person for a lot of their work.
It was exciting for me to get involved with Healthy Lake Winona because sometimes working on Big River, I feel like I'm documenting the decline of a great river. And that gets kind of depressing. You don't see much effect from all these initiatives. And the interesting thing about being involved in Healthy Lake Winona is I have come to realize that we'll never be able to clean up the Mississippi River. But if we clean up all the small watersheds that contribute to the Mississippi River, the Mississippi River will, as a result, become cleaner and healthier. We're just looking at the water from one county. And if we can't make a difference in that small area, then really there's no hope for the Mississippi River.
So Lake Winona is impaired for eutrophication, which is just a fancy term for too many nutrients. So there's too much phosphorus in Lake Winona. So when we assess a lake for eutrophication and we deem it impaired for eutrophication, it doesn't only mean that there's too much phosphorus, but it also means that the water clarity isn't that great and that there's too much algae. The algae that we're talking about is called chlorophyll A. So from our assessment that we did for the lake, we determined that most of the phosphorus comes from two places. The number one is internally. When a lake has a high internal phosphorus load, it means the phosphorus that's in the lake gets trapped in the sediment that's at the bottom of the lake. So that's one source of phosphorus for Lake Winona. Our assessment also found the second source is from stormwater. So anytime that it rains, rainwater picks up things from the streets, sidewalks, lawns, and then those eventually go to the lowest point, which is Lake Winona.
The current biological condition of the lake is probably the best it has been since probably the 1950s or even before. The chemical condition, though, is still an issue. We still are getting some of those nutrients washed into the lake coming down upstream from the Gilmore Creek, Gilmore Valley watershed, because it does connect via Boulder Lake to Lake Winona. We also get input from city storm sewers, and so there's runoff from that area too. And it's always going to carry in some nutrients as long as we have those kind of connections to the lake. Doing various things on the landscape can reduce the input, but there's still a legacy of those materials on the bottom in the lake. Dredging the East Lake changed the chemical condition dramatically there because we've removed a lot of those sediments that had the phosphorus and had the nitrates in it and took them out of the system. So they're gone. But we still have the West Lake with all of its legacy sediment still present. So there are possibilities, but they always recommend treating the watershed first so that no more inputs will be there before you start dealing with the stuff that's already present.
I would definitely say that it's a swimmable, fishable lake. Recreating there isn't going to be an issue. I mean, some people might be turned off at certain points of the year if they notice there's an algae bloom on the lake or too many aquatic plants growing.
All living organisms do need nutrients, and having some phosphate, some nitrate in a system is good because that's what plants need to grow. But as soon as you start getting too much, then that produces excessive growth of plants or algae. Too many plants in a system, too much algae growing in a system. People look at those lakes and say, no, I don't like that lake. That's not in very good shape. I guess the idealistic lake is one from the great North Country where you look in, there's not a single plant, there's not a single bit of algae, it's crystal clear, you can see the bottom. That will never happen in southern Minnesota. That doesn't mean we have to have lakes that are filled with algae or filled with plants. We can have a happy medium.
Lake Winona, here we are on Lake Winona. No, it's an urban lake, and it's difficult to manage because you have all of this hard surface surrounding the lake. So you have water rushing in it fast, coming in from storm drains, bringing leaf litter, grass litter, all other kinds of chemicals and things that are coming out of cars, and then it ends up in the lake. And the hardest part about that is it's really hard to control how people manage their landscape on their own property. You know, we like to have them not use lawn fertilizers. We like to have them compost their leaves. We like to have them not blow grass clippings into the street. All of that washes into the lake, builds up nutrients in the form of phosphorus, and then we get these these blooms of leafy pond weed, milfoil, and algae. And that's why people don't like swimming in the lake anymore, because they don't like swimming in around weeds. So all of this concrete was put in here by the city 30 plus years ago in order to stabilize shoreline, and that was their first attempt. When we get up here a little bit further, you'll see what Healthy Lake Winona has done to try to stabilize the shoreline without using riprap. And the thing that the riprap does is it kind of makes it difficult to manage the shoreline and the weed growth and the trees that grow in there because you have all those rocks in there. And what Healthy Lake Winona did was they cut a lot of buckthorn on the south side of the lake, and the city transported it over in dump trucks and left it here by the north side of the lake, and then we rolled it in these big burlap, we called them burritos.
They basically wrapped branches in a coir, so like a netting fiber, and attached those to the lake bottom so that waves wouldn't wash away the shore. And so that allowed the shoreline to revegetate and become stabilized. And as part of that, they also planted emergent vegetation, so stuff that grows right on the water's edge or in the water. That's also a way to stabilize and add diversity to the ecosystem. Above ground and in the areas not right on the shoreline, but adjacent to it, we took out some turf and planted a prairie. So it's a way to add pollinator habitat, add some pretty strong rooted plants that are gonna provide stabilization, and also just add a different kind of landscape. One that was very prominent in Winona area, but largely has been relegated to the goat prairies and the bluffs now, but once was most of Winona, that prairie type.
We wanted to use that project as like a demonstration of what ecological restoration would look like on the shorelines, to kind of get some people used to the idea of seeing something different than mowed turf. Prior to those prairie plantings, those areas were just mowed all the way down to the shoreline. They were eroding pretty bad, so we wanted to address that at the same time. I came into Healthy Lake Winona not very familiar at all with aquatic ecosystems and their health. And the prairie and savanna is kind of my area of expertise. But I see the importance of the interplay between the terrestrial and the aquatic ecosystems. If you have native vegetation, healthy ecosystems on the shorelines, you're actually sucking nitrogen and phosphorus out of the aquatic ecosystem. So now we have a proof of concept that people can see, and they can understand that that's kind of a target for what we're trying to do in more areas along the lake.
Not a lot of people like to go swimming in weed beds, and much of the lake, both the basins, were in shallow waters filled with aquatic vegetation. Macrophytes basically up to the surface for several months of the year.
Probably the most prevalent and damaging is something called curly-leaf pondweed, and that's a species that basically in the West Lake, the smaller lake, probably covers 90% of the lake in the spring, and probably about, I would estimate, about 50% of the big lake as well. It is widely spread throughout Minnesota's lakes. Any aquatic invasive species is very hard to get rid of once it's established.
The city purchased several different varieties of weed harvesters back in the 80s and 90s to try to manage some of the weed problems. And they still have one of the larger ones, the commercial grade Altosar weed harvester. Currently, we only use it for creating the swimming path for the Winona triathlon. We've had some trouble with the weed harvester maintenance-wise, keeping it running. That is a way to make the lake swimmable in areas where you've mowed it, but it doesn't have long-term effects of controlling the pondweed. It'll still grow back in the same places next year. So that kind of led to the dredging in the 1999 through 2001. That made the lake significantly deeper. It eliminated lots of shallower areas, and it greatly reduced the number and the coverage of aquatic plants in Lake Winona, the eastern basin. Didn't change the western basin, just the eastern basin. They need water that's less than 15 feet deep. So if you make the lake deeper by dredging it and putting the lake bottom below that, they can't establish. It's just too deep for them to grow up into the light. That would be in the order of millions of dollars versus maybe tens of thousands of dollars for doing the herbicide treatment. A couple years ago in 2020, received some grant funding from the DNR to do a herbicide treatment. And what we did was treat about 12 acres of lake surface on the West Lake. And I've got a map here. So this is Highway 61. And we treated the area, the far western reach of the lake. For that summer, very low levels of the curly-leaf pondweed. But the following year, curly-leaf pondweed density was still pretty strong.
To battle curly-leaf pondweed, it really takes a multi-year effort. It's been done somewhat successfully in some Twin Cities metro lakes, where over the course of 7 or 8 years, they've been able to get the population down to a fraction of what it once was. With that also means a lot more herbicide being applied to the lake. So before the city embarks on that path, we do want to consult with the community and also the city council to see if that is an option they'd like us to pursue.
Yeah, the purple loosestrife. It was a larger problem a couple decades ago. I would say it's much more naturalized into the ecosystem now. Invasive species are problematic, and they do displace native species, and they also reinforce unhealthy qualities in habitats. But really, a lot of problems would be solved if we were focusing, instead of on those specific invasive species, rather on the ecosystem as a whole.
There's no shortage of fish in Lake Winona. I've examined the DNR fisheries reports from prior to that dredging to after the dredging for many, many years. I think I had 10 or 15 years on either side of that. And that dredging, deepening the lake, getting rid of a lot of the macrophyte beds, significantly improved the fish community in the East Basin. The DNR looks at the dredging as having improved the fisheries in there dramatically by removing the weeds and deepening the lake too. Before Lake Winona was rehabilitated in the 1970s, it was very nutrient rich then. It had a very dense population of fishes. A lot of them were what we consider to be rough fishes, non-game fishes. And Lake Winona was prone to winter kill, basically meaning it lost its oxygen during the winter underneath the ice because there were so many fish concentrated in Lake Winona that they used up the oxygen. And so when Lake Winona would thaw in the springtime, it would release all those dead bodies of fish, and the fish would wash up the shore, and they'd have regular pickups of dead fish. One of the major things that they did originally was install a bunch of aerating systems into Lake Winona. And they would run all winter long, and there would be open water around those aerators. They were basically just giant bubblers, much like you would aerate a fish tank. And then after they dredged the basin 23 years ago, they realized they didn't need to operate them in the wintertime anymore because there was always adequate oxygen present in the lake. The lake volume increased dramatically. The fish populations declined because we didn't have all those rough fish anymore. And there was plenty of oxygen in the lake over the winter to sustain the fish that we had. So they haven't operated any of the aerators on Lake Winona since basically the dredging ended 20 years ago. The only aeration units that they oftentimes have is one that's down there, the Huff Street Fishing Pier. And that's primarily to keep open water so that the ice doesn't damage the fishing pier. And so by not having open water due to the aerators, it's opened up a lot more place for the ice fishermen to use, and people can just go out on the ice anywhere in Lake Winona in the wintertime, and it's relatively thick, safe ice to go on.
We have anywheres from 30 to 60 geese that call Lake Winona home on a regular basis every spring. The issue is they can be aggressive towards people who use the path, and probably more than anything else, their droppings are a nuisance. It's kind of gross to step into goose poop, and they produce a lot of that. I think about 5 years ago, the city put together a plan with input from Healthy Lake Winona on a waterfowl management strategy. This was conducted with the DNR as well. The strategy we're working on is limiting population growth. The geese in Lake Winona have a relatively pretty good life. There's few predators. There's plenty of stuff to eat. They like Kentucky bluegrass. That's one of their favorite foods. There's a lot of that. So it's a place where the population really could expand pretty quickly. So we're trying to control that by removing the eggs. We're not killing any adult geese, but we are keeping the geese from reproducing and expanding the population that way. A goose pair, over their lifetime could easily add 30 to 40 geese to the overall population, and that number could start to take off if we didn't control it. So that's what we're trying to prevent. We're not trying to eliminate geese, we are trying to limit their population growth, keep it more or less what it is, to minimize human and animal conflict, and also protect some of our areas, because the geese, they do go up and down the shoreline, they eat vegetation along the shoreline, so they can be somewhat destructive. The route we've taken for controlling the goose eggs is we literally go to the nests, we grab them and replace them with ceramic dummy eggs. There are still goslings, baby geese every year, but for the last 4 years or so, there's been between 40 and 50 eggs that we've removed from hatching. The goose removal process that we use is the recommended method by the Animal Humane Society of America. If a goose egg is more than 2 weeks along in its development, we leave it there. You determine that age by putting the egg in water, and depending on how it floats, you can tell how old that egg is. And so there have been cases where we've taken the egg, we've floated it, and we've had to put it back. And one thing we like about the egg removal and switch method is we can get to the nest, grab the eggs, and switch them out in a matter of minutes. It is rather stressful to the geese to have a human right on their nest. They're not happy to see us. They're stressed out. They're calling for their mate. They're sometimes dive bombing us. And so we want to get in and out quickly to limit the stress that the geese have to endure. People always ask about what happens to those goose eggs. We end up just throwing them away.
When the EPA did the study on the lake and declared it an impaired water, they looked at a lot of sources of where the sediment and the phosphorus was coming from. There are really excellent farming operations upstream in Gilmore Valley, and there are some that aren't doing a very good job too. And we thought, it should be this, or what about the St. Mary's campus, or what about Boulder Lake? And there are all things there that can be improved. But they found that the big problem is the storm sewer system in town. And that's probably the thing we should really aim to fix first.
So some of the specific steps that Healthy Lake Winona is taking for water quality, I think they started with rain gardens. So those are basins that collect stormwater and filter it through the ground rather than have it go to the storm sewer, which goes untreated into the lake. So the lake receives much of the runoff from the city's streets about Broadway south. And so they've worked with homeowners to put in rain gardens to collect that water and filter it. They also work on education. So they worked with me and the city to put together a mailer for our water bills that educates folks on stormwater pollution and what goes down the drain goes to the lake, and some simple tips that they can do to help with water quality, such as picking up after their pets so that doesn't get washed in, and also raking up leaves so those don't get washed down as well, because that's a source of nutrients that the native system would probably stay mostly on the ground, but because we have conveyances that go to the lake, it's sort of an extra boost of nutrients that the lake really doesn't need.
There could be a lake that's listed as impaired tomorrow, and it may take my entire career, if not longer, to flip that lake. But it really all depends on, what are its issues? Do we have control over those issues? Lake Winona, we know that most of the phosphorus is internal, right? So that means that most of the phosphorus is in the lake bottom and it gets released. So we have to do something with the lake bottom.
One of the ways that you could improve things in the lake is to deal with the phosphorus with the chemical you need to spread on the bottom of the lake to keep the phosphorus contained is alum, which is fairly inexpensive, and probably the cheapest, easiest way to solve the curly leaf pondweed problem is to just put herbicide in the lake that kills curly leaf pondweed, and we've done that. The problem with Lake Winona is not that it doesn't have enough alum or herbicide.
The good news is we're not terribly over that phosphorus limit. It isn't beyond what we can do immediately. So there's a solution called alum. It's actually the same stuff you'd find in the baking aisle at a supermarket. So that is a way to bind that phosphorus that's in the lake and keep that from actually recirculating. And if we were to do that treatment, we would get the phosphorus levels down below the impaired level. The problem is there's still always sources coming in. So we would need to do stormwater ponds, a lot more rain gardens, and other measures to keep that phosphorus level from kind of rebounding up.
I think we have to go deeper to solve the problem. A lot of times we say, why is that a problem? And we try to look, as we say, upstream. So rather than just covering up the problem or redoing something, we want to stop that problem at its source. So rather than dredging out sediment from the lake, it would be good to first reduce the amount of sediment that's going in the lake and get as far upstream as we can with the solutions. And if we have to use a little herbicide or if we have to do some dredging, it's going to be a lot more effective. You're going to multiply the effect of those things.
We will hopefully have funding to undertake some of these projects. And I think we have a lake that's in a very savable condition, but it is going to take time and commitment to get it off the impaired list and back to being a really healthy water body.
Lake Winona is providing a service to the city by absorbing half of our stormwater. The rest of it goes into the Mississippi. And we just need to find the right balance between how much we value that service and how much we want to see that lake healthy and people be able to use that for recreation. I think of a lot of our ecosystems as kind of cesspools right now because they're not functioning anymore. They're just accumulating more and more nutrient, which is putting them into this late stage eutrophic state. I think we really need to be trying to think big about how we're going to deal with that in the long term, unless we're willing to just let the lake stay as it is. Hopefully we're not okay with that, and hopefully we're thinking about what it's worth to us to invest in improving that ecosystem. How do we reintegrate ourselves with these ecosystems around us to make them more functional again, both for nature around us and for ourselves?
Our main challenge is to get people to think about water differently. It's kind of a philosophical point of view that has to change with people if we're going to ever change the Mississippi River, this small watershed we're on. We have to realize that we share the water. You know, some people say, well, what I do on my property is my own business, and so what? You can do whatever you want on your property. Well, that's fine. If all the water that fell on your property, if all the rain that fell on your property stayed on your property forever, then fine. I would have no problem with that. But the fact is almost as soon as that water falls on your property, it moves into someone else's property. And eventually, in a big part of the city, it moves very quickly into Lake Winona, which is probably the most valued piece of property in the whole city, if not the county, in terms of public use and enjoyment. It's a good opportunity for us to all learn the ways that we can change our own lives in a way that will make the world better for us to live in. The Environmental Protection Agency says, okay, you have to solve these problems. And it mostly goes back to phosphorus, which is mostly getting into the lake from sediment washing in the lake. They don't give us a structure for monitoring it. And monitoring the things that we should be measuring, some of them cost money. and we have to have a schedule for doing it so that it means something.
MPCA has our what we call intensive watershed monitoring, where we go into all of our watersheds in the state of Minnesota once every 10 years. Let's see, we first sampled Lake Winona in 2010 and 2011, which means we came back in 2020 and 2021 to resample Lake Winona. We have not looked at that data yet, but we are going to be assessing it next year about this time.
What we're in the process of doing now is creating a scorecard for the lake. And then year to year, if we don't see any changes or if we're backsliding, then we will have the evidence we need to go after the resources that we need to make some significant changes in that. We can see what's happening with these, maybe a half a dozen things in the lake: nitrogen, phosphorus, invasive plants, carp, geese. I mean, there are a number of things we could track that would be very helpful. Then we get feedback as to what things are working and what things aren't working, or what our priorities should be.
I look at all the water quality data. I look at, what rivers, lakes, and streams are impaired, which aren't impaired. And then what I do is I write basically a list of recommendations of what anyone can do to meet those water quality goals.
When we go to apply for grants, we can say, look, this has been a problem for several years and it's getting worse. Or we've tried all these things and they're not working. We need a grant to try something different. It's going to help us to focus the resources in the ways that would be most effective. It's kind of a broad task, and it's going very slowly. I mean, when I get frustrated with trying to clean up the Mississippi River and I think of how long Healthy Lake Winona has been working on the issues with our lake, it teaches me to be patient.
Well, I should say that one of the recommendations for Lake Winona that MPCA offered was to continue developing citizens group like Healthy Lake Winona. And if they can just keep doing this hard work and keep, getting people involved, you can imagine the kind of impact that we can make to Lake Winona. And I think that's just so great to see something succeed like this group, because we don't get that all the time.
Yeah, I think the Healthy Lake Winona organization has really been doing some very good things for the lake, because even though a lot of the really big changes happened back in the 1980s or in 2000 after the dredging, there's always something coming up. There's always another, dare I say, problem. We see a continual suite of issues develop that by having an organization willing to be interested in and be active in trying to correct some of those issues has really been helpful.
There's always something that someone can do to protect their lake. Besides being active in your community and doing your best to keep, lawn clippings and leaves out of your storm drain, I think the other single most important thing that people can do is, this is gonna sound really cheesy, but bond with their water quality resources. Like, go take a walk around the lake. Just go sit and enjoy the beauty that we have. I mean, we're so lucky to be where we are and have the water resources we have. And it's so easy to take them for granted. And so I think slowing down and just appreciating that is extremely beneficial, because the more you care about something, the more likely you are to talk to somebody about it and to advocate for it.